Okay, hello everyone. I am Martha. My pronouns are they, them. And like AJ said, I'm a second year MSc student here at SFU. I'm so grateful to be here. Last year I was here talking about what I was going to do, and now I get to talk about what I did do and what I did find. I want to recognize that my work occurs across many different territories. My research team is based here on this campus on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish people. Oh, I also want to give a trigger warning for transphobia, homophobia, and mentions of abuse. Who's excited? We know that sports can be a really fulfilling environment for a lot of people, but at the same time, traumatic and abusive for sexual and gender minorities. Trans athletes, particularly trans women and trans women of color, have been facing intense scrutiny in the media lately. And the scrutiny is under the guise of protecting women's sport and keeping it fair and safe, when really this is just based in transphobia. So my research team, the Reaffirm Collaborative, as Milo mentioned, we ran the Unicorn Study, which stood for Understanding Communities, Relationships, and Networks. And it was a study for anyone and everyone ages 15 to 29 across Canada and the US. And we're looking at where youth have had their identities affirmed or denied. We had over 9,000 people across both countries take the survey. And my data is looking at those who are cis and non-binary and live in Canada. My definition of non-binary is used as both an identity term and an umbrella term. So it encompasses those who are non-binary, agender, third gender, genderqueer, as well as people who are trans and non-binary, or just don't identify with the binary gender. Here are some insights into my sample. I have over 1,900 cis youth and over 2,500 who are non-binary, and the mean age for both groups is 19. The top 4 provinces we received responses from are Ontario, Quebec, BC, and Alberta. And 90% of my sample lives in urban settings and 10% in rural. And regarding race, our sample was predominantly white. Here we have my breakdown of sexuality. 95% of my sample identifies as a sexual or gender minority. And we were surprised by how many bisexuals we have. I'm also really glad that we have a percentage of asexual people, as their experiences are not always represented in research. We have a lot of participants still in high school, with 47% of non-binary respondents still in high school, but this is not totally surprising with the age of my participants, and the student status is reflected in some of my sports settings findings, which I will touch on later. Getting into my thesis data, looking at participation in sports, we see that very few non-binary youth are still in sport, with only 11% for non-binary compared to 18% for cis. 62% of non-binary and 57% of cis youth have participated in the past, and around 26% of both groups have never participated. These active participation rates are lower than the Canadian non-queer focused average, as the Canadian Fitness and Lifestyle Research Institute found that 44% of Canadians ages 18 to 24 currently participate in sport. But our numbers aren't totally surprising since my sample is so queer. Here we see that the top 3 reasons that non-binary youth are avoiding joining sports are all discriminatory comments, encompassing transphobic, homophobic, and sexist comments, followed by change room and locker room layouts, dress codes, and having to choose a gender when joining a team. Looking at gender inclusion, I found that 30% of non-binary youth have avoided joining a sport because they worry about reactions to their gender, whereas only 3% of cis youth said this. 45% of non-binary participants who currently or have played sports have felt the need to change their gender expression in order to fit in with their teams. Unpacking those 45%, we see where youth have most commonly felt the need to change their gender expression, with high school, rec, and elementary school teams being the most common. So these numbers mean that of those who selected that they have had to change their gender expression, 56% selected high school as a site leading to this change. I included Team Canada to show that we did have respondents who perform at this level, and we also had some respondents select professional teams as well. Looking at how many youth left sport because of reactions to their gender identity, expression, or sexuality, to me, the most significant finding is how many youth are contemplating leaving. I see a lot of room for action and potential here, where if we start changing policies and educating teams on how to be more inclusive, we can potentially see more youth staying in sport and having better and safer experiences. We found that almost 20% of non-binary youth have witnessed someone being physically harassed because of their gender. Now, this abuse has a lot of layers to it because it's not only difficult for those who are experiencing it, but it can also be hard for those who may not be out to their team and see others being abused because of their gender. For all instances, non-binary youth witnessed and experienced abuse at higher proportions than cis youth. And I think they could be witnessing abuse at higher proportions because they're more sensitive to it and can call it out for what it is. So now that I have all of these kind of depressing stats, where do we go from here? Non-binary people in Canada are asking for policies to protect them in sport. And while we've had some created to protect trans people, non-binary people have been continuously left out. So I have partnered with Trans Connect, a health and community program supporting gender minorities in the East and West Kootenay regions. And we've created a project with the goal of identifying strategies to affirm non-binary and gender minority youth in sport. I will go to 2 youth group sessions, one in Nelson and one in Castlegar with Trans Connect. And during these sessions, we'll talk about my findings and just talk with the youth and ask what they want to see changed in sport right now, and just empower them to share their input and share their needs, and not only drive change in their communities, but across the country. So we will create 2 products. Our first product will be a 2-page report, and it'll show the stats from Unicorn, what we did, and also include all of the suggestions by the youth. It'll be housed on Trans Connect and Reaffirm's website for anyone and everyone to download, use, and implement in their environments. There'll be some suggestions that are specific to schools, and some to sports organizations, and some for both. We'll have a series of infographics that'll be shared through a social media campaign. And the first slide will read, what's the situation? And the second one will read, it'll have the suggestions from the youth that we talked to. And these again will be hosted on both websites and shared on both Instagram platforms, Twitter, Facebook, the whole rigmarole. And anyone can share these, and hopefully this is a real tipping point in sport. So this brings me to the end of the presentation. I want to thank my amazing research team, and not just those on the slide, as well as Travis for supervising me. A thank you to Skszwx for funding my thesis work, the Office of Community Engagement for funding our new Trans Connect project, Nicola Hare for being so gracious and partnering with me for this project. It's bringing me so much joy. Sport's suffering now. This is really exciting. And a big thank you to everyone who came here, and my friends who are watching online. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.